On July 8, 2026, the FTC called it a historic victory for the American farmer. The court documents tell a different story. The payout works out to 79 cents per acre. 79 cents. Not per repair, not per hour of downtime, per acre. For 8 years of being locked out of your own tractor. And that $99 million headline number? It represents 0.97% of John Deere's single-year net profit, about 3.5 days of corporate income. But the real story isn't the money, it's the calendar. Because buried in the federal consent decree is an expiration date, 2036, 10 years. And that number lines up with something John Deere has been building, very quietly, for a very long time. We'll get to how they pulled this off, and we'll come back to a Missouri farmer named Jared Wilson, who read the fine print and did something about it. But first, you need to understand what a modern tractor actually is, because it's not what your grandfather drove. A modern John Deere tractor is a computer network with wheels. Every major mechanical piece, the fuel injectors, the transmission, the hydraulics, is governed by its own electronic control unit, an ECU. They all talk to each other over something called a controller area network, or CAN bus. Think of it like a nervous system. Every twitch, every valve, every injector pulse, routed through code that Deere wrote and Deere controls. Here's where it gets interesting. Say a hydraulic sensor fails, a $20 part. You can physically swap it in 10 minutes with a wrench, but when you turn the key, the central computer notices something. The new part has a different serial number, a different digital signature, and the tractor decides it doesn't trust it. Deere calls this component pairing. Every replacement part, even an unprogrammed mechanical one, has to be handshaked into the machine by authorized software before the tractor will accept it. So it drops into what's called Limp mode, a $500,000 machine now restricted to 1 or 2 miles per hour, right in the middle of your harvest window. The only way to clear it? A proprietary diagnostic tool called Service Advisor. And Service Advisor was locked to authorized John Deere dealers. So you call the dealer. They charge you a $230 truck roll fee just to drive out, then $130 to $150 an hour in labor. For what? For a technician to plug in a cable and click Authorize, a digital handshake. The physical repair was easy. The permission was the paywall. The average software lock service call runs $360 to $530, just to unlock a part you already bought and installed yourself. And during peak harvest, a stalled combine bleeds between $1,000 and $5,000 an hour in lost yield and weather risk. This is the leverage. This is why the lawsuits started stacking up. The roots go back to October 1992, when Congress passed the Clean Air Act amendments and mandated onboard diagnostics on vehicles. Manufacturers realized computerized emissions controls could double as a legal wall around independent repair. By October 2018, U.S. PIRG published a landmark study called Warranties in the Void, documenting how heavy machinery makers systematically used warranty language and proprietary software blocks to prevent farmers from fixing what they owned. Deere and the Association of Equipment Manufacturers launched something called R2 Solutions in September 2018. It promised repair-friendly machinery by January 2021. That deadline came and went. No real tools shipped. Then, July 8, 2021, President Biden signs Executive Order 14036, promoting competition in the American economy, specifically directing the FTC to draft rules on agricultural repair restrictions. January 12, 2022. Forest River Farms in North Dakota files the first class action antitrust suit against Deere in the Northern District of Illinois. Sherman Act violations. 2 months later, on March 3, 2022, the National Farmers Union files a formal complaint with the FTC, accusing Deere of deliberately amassing a monopoly over the repair services market. By June, 13 separate lawsuits from farmers across the country get consolidated into a single multi-district litigation, MDL 3027, assigned to U.S. District Judge Iain Johnston in Rockford. In January 2023, Deere signed a highly publicized Memorandum of Understanding with the American Farm Bureau Federation. Right to Repair advocates called it a toothless PR stunt. No judicial enforcement, no teeth, designed to head off state-level legislation. Then, February 13, 2023, the Department of Justice files a statement of interest in the MDL, publicly opposing Deere's motion to dismiss. In November 2023, Johnston denies Deere's motion to dismiss. His opinion runs 89 pages. He writes that the complaint is chock full of factual allegations, showing Deere has ultimate control of the repair market. Then, January 15, 2025, the FTC piles on. Joined by the Attorneys General of Illinois, Arizona, Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, it files a parallel federal antitrust suit, alleging violations of Section 2 of the Sherman Act and Section 5 of the FTC Act. Minnesota AG Keith Ellison goes on the offensive. He says Deere's practice has been driving up farmers' costs, hurting independent small businesses, and making it harder for Minnesotans to afford their lives. June 10, 2025, Judge Johnston denies Deere's motion to dismiss the FTC case too. Now Deere is fighting a private MDL, a federal antitrust action, and 5 state AGs simultaneously. For Deere, the math had gone bad. 2 federal cases, 1 MDL, 5 state AGs, and a judge who thought their case stunk. They needed an exit. And the exit they chose is genuinely brilliant, in a dark way. April 6, 2026. Deere announces a proposed $99 million settlement for the class action, no admission of wrongdoing, a pledge to make diagnostic tools available for at least 10 years. On May 18, 2026, Judge Johnston grants preliminary approval. A final fairness hearing gets scheduled for October 29th, the opt-out deadline, September 15th. Enter Willie Cade. Cade is a right-to-repair advocate whose grandfather was John Deere's chief engineer in 1925, held over 150 patents, so this is personal. And Cade did the math the press releases skipped. $99 million, minus roughly $20 million in attorney fees and administrative costs. Net fund, $79 million. Divided among more than 200,000 eligible farmers, representing about 100 million acres. 79 cents per acre, over 8 years. For a typical 500-acre Midwestern family farm, the total one-time payout works out to about $395. Willie Cade analyzed one farmer's actual invoices. $600,000 in repairs and parts over the lockout period. That farmer's projected recovery? Roughly $1,000. 600 to 1. That's the ratio between what the farmer paid into the monopoly and what the settlement offers back. Do you see how absurd this is? The average settlement payout, $395, doesn't even cover the cost of a single dealer service call. Which brings us back to Jared Wilson. Wilson runs Wilson Farms Land and Cattle Company in Missouri. On July 2, 2026, he files a formal legal objection to the settlement. Wilson writes that the payout is negligible, that it's probably less than what John Deere would pay if they took this case to trial, and crucially, that Deere's insurance carriers will likely cover the whole thing, meaning Deere itself may pay effectively nothing. Wilson's conclusion, the settlement provides absolutely no disincentive for companies to act like this in the future. Wilson wasn't alone. Wyoming ranchers filed alongside him, calling the payout, in their words, a pittance. For context, John Deere's fiscal 2023 revenue was $61.2 billion. Net income, $10.1 billion. $99 million is 0.16% of a single year's revenue, 3.5 days of profit. Meanwhile, back in August 2021, before the first lawsuit was even filed, Deere quietly acquired a Silicon Valley autonomous driving startup called Bear Flag Robotics. Purchase price, $250 million. Deere spent more than 2.5 times the entire class action settlement acquiring one autonomy company, 4 years before the settlement even existed. January 4, 2022, just 8 days before Forest River Farms filed that first lawsuit, Deere unveiled the fully autonomous 8R tractor at CES in Las Vegas. No driver, no cab operator, just software. Then, in June 2024, Justin Rose, Deere's president of Lifecycle Solutions, goes on a business podcast and says the quiet part out loud. Deere's corporate goal, 10% of total annual revenue from recurring software subscriptions by 2030. On $60 billion revenue, that's $6 billion a year in software, recurring. Now watch the trick. Under the settlement, Deere agreed to make diagnostic tools available to farmers and independent repair shops. Here's how they did it. A new product called Operation Center Pro Service. Starting price, $195 per machine per year. To use it, you have to register your machinery on Deere's cloud-based operations center, and you sign a terms of service that grants Deere the right to harvest and analyze your agronomic data. yield rates, soil moisture, planting density, engine telemetry. That data, your data, is the exact training fuel Deere needs for its autonomous machine learning models. You pay them $195 to teach their robots how to replace you. And because the diagnostics are a software license, not a product you own, Deere can revoke it remotely. If they suspect emissions bypass or unauthorized tuning, they can lock you out of your own diagnostic tools instantly. Which brings us back to that expiration date, 2036, 10 years. Because by 2036, the operator-driven tractors covered by this settlement will be legacy machines, museum pieces. The new standard is autonomous fleets. That's not speculation. On June 12, 2026, less than a month before the FTC settlement was signed, U.S. Sugar announced the deployment of a fully autonomous John Deere fleet in Florida, managed through a remote, subscription-based platform. Autonomous tractors don't rely on hydraulic sensors and fuel injectors you can wrench. They rely on stereo, high dynamic range cameras, LiDAR arrays, and NVIDIA-based edge processing servers, calibrated with proprietary cryptographic keys. None of that hardware is covered by mechanical right-to-repair frameworks. When a sensor array fails on an autonomous tractor, there is no independent shop that can fix it. There is no equivalent of Willie Cade with a laptop. And under the new model, called Autonomy-as-a-Service, Deere doesn't sell the software. They license it, $14 to $18 per acre, annually, plus another $5 per acre for the See and Spray automation bundle. A 1,000-acre farm will pay Deere $14,000 to $18,000 every single year, recurring, forever, for software licensing on a tractor they already bought. For the same acreage, the one-time settlement payout is $790. The annual autonomy subscription is up to $18,000 every year, in perpetuity. Denver Caldwell, Deere's VP of Aftermarket Support, gave the July 8th press statement. He said producers demand flexible and world-class capabilities, and Deere would continue to deliver on that expectation. Translation: the legal mandate became a subscription product. The court order became a revenue stream. Chairman Ferguson called the settlement a protection for the nation's most valuable and virtuous citizens, quoting Thomas Jefferson. It's beautiful rhetoric. But Ferguson himself had dissented from the initial 2025 filing, arguing the FTC was rushing to court for a press release instead of pursuing lasting legislative protection. Daniel Garnera, director of the FTC Bureau of Competition, framed it differently. He said the settlement enables farmers to do what they've done for generations, fix their own tractors. Notice what he didn't say, that they'd be able to do it in 2036. Ellison's office recovered exactly $1 million from Deere to cover state attorney fees and investigative costs. $1 million. For a company netting $10 billion a year. Line up the dates. 2026, settlement signed. 2030, Deere hits 10% recurring software revenue. 2036, consent decree expires. The decade of mandated repair access is exactly the runway needed to make repair itself obsolete. Jason Kobler at 404 Media, who's been covering this beat for over a decade, put it plainly. The FTC deal, he wrote, finally has teeth. But the broader war has already shifted to a battlefield where teeth don't matter. Software subscriptions, autonomous fleets, a landscape where repair is a category that no longer applies. And this playbook is spreading. Tesla locks physical battery capacity behind over-the-air paywalls. BMW briefly charged monthly subscriptions for heated seats already installed in the car. Smart thermostats get bricked when the manufacturer sunsets support. They call it the SaaSification of physical goods. You don't own the product, you license permission to use it, until they change their minds. Which is why something strange is happening at rural farm auctions. Pre-1980 John Deere tractors, no microchips, no ECUs, no software locks, are commanding astronomical prices. A pristine 1979 or 1980 model routinely sells for $43,500 to $61,000, nearly double its original retail price, in 1979 dollars. The only way American farmers have found to truly guarantee the right to fix their own machinery is to buy equipment built before the software existed. They are retreating, deliberately, 40 years into the past. The consent decree expires in 2036, the autonomous fleets will be waiting, and the 79 cents per acre will be long spent.